Okay, so in this lecture I'm going to talk about list operations. So I'm going to talk about appending elements to a list, inserting the element to a list, finding the element in the list, removing an element from the list, and concatenations, inequality and inequality testing, sum, max, mean, and sorting, and copying the list. So this is the main subtopic of this lecture. Okay, so let's talk about the appending elements. Appending elements is sometimes we need to add elements, right? We need to add elements to the end. So this is important, to the end, right? To the end as needed. So first we have friends is a variable name, reference variable, and it's pointing to the empty list. And if you want an element, Harry, right, then you use reference variable name, friends, right, friends, and then append is a Python built-in list method or list function. Method and function, sometimes I use exchange of lists. So friends is variable name, list variable name, and then you use append functions, and then you use the element that you want to add to the list friends. So once you use append, then you have a Harry, right? Harry is the first element, and then you add Emily. So Emily is going to be added to the end, right? So the Emily right now is at the position 1, at the index 1. Bob and Carrie are added subsequently, and Bob, as we can see, is at the index number 3, and then Carrie is at the index index number 3. So Bob is at the index number 2, and Carrie is at the index number 3, right? So let's just file, open a new. Then let's just try this. Appending elements, right? Let's just do that. So friends, now it's an empty element, right? And then friends dot append. I'm going to add Harry, right? So now I just appended Harry, and then I'm going to append Emily. Oops. I'm going to append Emily as the next element, and then I'm going to add Bob, and then I'm going to add Carrie. So let's just print the friends. Initially it was what? It was empty list, right? Now it's going to be the list with the 4 elements. So print friends, right? So let's just print it. Run the module. I have to save it, right? So I'll say okay, I'll just save it here. The file name. So I'll just say a list operation. I'm gonna use the list operation as my file name. Okay, so save. Yes. So now this friends is a list with the 4 elements: Harry, Emily, Bob, and Carrie. And inserting elements is, let's say you have existing list. Now if you use name with the reference variable, and then the function insert, or the method insert, and then the first argument, mean this one indicates the index or the position. So and then Cindy is the element that you want to add. So that means you try to add the Cindy, right, the element, to at the position number 1, at the index number 1. So the Cindy, as you can see, right, the Cindy was now is added to this list at the position 1, at the index 1, and the subsequent elements is shifted to down. So the Emily now at the index number 2, and Bob at 3, and Carrie at 4, as you can see. So what you can do is, I'm going to friends dot insert at the index number 1. I'm going to add Cindy string, right? Cindy is a value of type string, and then print friends. Run this. So now, as you can see, I just successfully added Cindy at the position number 1, at the index number 1. Now, finding the elements, you use index functions, right? And then it's the name of the reference variable, and then index functions, and then elements. So if you want to know the position or the index number at which the element occurs, the index method or index function yield the index of the first match. So this is like first match. So the Emily this is index number, the Harry at the index number 0, Emily is at the index number 1. So when I run this function, it should returns 1, right? Because Emily is at the position number 1, or at the index number 1. So let's say friends. I'm going to run another Harry copy paste, right? Harry, Emily, and Carrie, and etc. So there are 2 Emilys, right? There are 2 Emilys. And then when I say n is equal to friends index dot Emily print n. So I'll say Emily is at index number n. Okay, so that's n should be 1, right? Because Harry is at the index number 0, and Emily is at the index number 1. So Emily is at the index number 1, right? By the way, this friends, now basically previously the friends up to this point, right? The friends up to this point was this one, right? And now this friends now is pointing to a new list, right? And then this friends is really pointing to this one, new list, right? Okay. And then next one is removing the element. You use pop. I'm gonna skip this example. The pop. No, actually, let's talk about pop. Pop is a functions or the method. This method removes the element at a given position. So this is what I'm going to. This is name of the list. Pop is a functions, and the argument they use what? Index. The position number. So this is what? Index number 0, index number 1. So this is trying to remove Cindy, because the Cindy is at the position number 1. So when you run this, the Cindy is going to be removed, and then all of the elements following the removed elements are moved up. So now Emily is moved up. So now Emily is at the position number 1, and etc. And the concatenation is they're using this plus operator, right? But remember, in Python, if you want to use this plus operator, the operands, both operands must be the same type. So as you can see, my friends is what? It's a list, right? It's something of a type list. And your friends is also something of type list. So that's why you are able to concatenate, because the left operand and the right operands, they are in the same, they are basically same type. Okay, replications, please read replications. I'm going to skip these replications. In equality testing, these two, they use this operator, right? If the two lists are same, it's going to return true, otherwise it's going to return false, right? And sum, maximum, and minimum, these are the three very important list method. The sum is what? The sum is, as an argument, if you put the list, it's going to return the sum of all the elements in the list. So sum is very important function. The sum function yields the sum of all the values in the list. And the max is going to get all the elements and then returns the maximum, right? And the minimum is same thing. It's going to look at all the elements in the list and try to find the minimum value. In this case, since Fred and Anne and Sue is what? Oops, I think there's a typo. It's a list. So you have to put a list. So you have to have a bracket. So the Fred and Anne are Sue are the list. So it's a list, and it's trying to find the minimum value, right? In this case, three of them are all string. It's trying to find lexicographically the minimum value. In this case, is N, because A is the first alphabet, right? A, and then A, B, C, D, E, F, and then S, right? So the N is a lexicographically minimum value in this case. So it's going to return N. And the sort method, it returns a list, right? Sorted. So it's sort method sorts a list of numbers or string. If the values is something like this, and then if you use a sort operator, it's going to return sorted list sorted. Now, and before I move to this subtopic, copying the list, let's talk about all the let's just summarize all the operations that I have just discussed so far. And whenever, if you look at this slide, whenever so for example, append, right? append, to be precisely, I have to call it a append. I should call it a method instead of functions. The reason is append is always is used with reference variable, right? In such a case, typically people use these functions as they call this function as a method instead of calling functions. So append is obviously a method because it's used with a reference variable dot append, and insert is better to be called. You better to call this insert as a method instead of a function, because it's used with what? It used with the list, the list variable. And then finding is also same thing. I'm gonna call it. It's better to call it as a method, right? And then removing the pop is also, it's better to, instead of a pop functions, I think it's better for it. We better call this as a method. Okay. And concatenations, I think this is just a special operator. So let's go to move the sum and maximum and minimum, and they use the word function instead of method. Why? Because when you use a sum, max, or min, as you can see, if you look at this example, they really do not use any reference variable, right? And they basically use a sum and max and min without using any reference variable. In such a case, then so it's better for call them sum, max, and min as a function. Okay. So the last example, sorting. The sorting is what? This is a method. Why? Because it's used with the values, reference variable. The values dot sort, right? So we have to better call it a method. So sort, right? The sort is a method. Now, so let's just try a couple of examples. So when you have a values 1, 16, 9, let's say, let's just okay, 16, 9, and let's just use this example, 9 and 4, right? And then if you want to sort this, you can say values, since the sort is what? Is a method, I have to use a reference variable, values dot sort, right? And now the values, this list has been sorted. So if I just print values, you see the sorted list as a result. Let's just run this. Now 1, 4, 9, and 16, right? So this new list and the values has been sorted by the sort method. And if you want to find the sum, or let's say try to find the sum. Since the sum is a function, you can use what? You can use this function without using any reference variables. So I'm going to try to find the sum of all these elements. So I can say print, and let's just sum s is equal to sum is name of reference variable, and sum is a functions, and it's going to return sum of all the elements in the list. So if I just print s, right, it's going to print the sum. So let's see. So 30, right? 30 is the sum of all the elements. And please try with the max and min, right? And let's take a look at the copying the list. This is my last topic. And as you can see, previously the list variables do not themselves hold its elements. They hold a reference to the actual list. So if you copy the reference, in this case you're copying the reference variable values to prices, both prices and values, these two reference variables basically are pointing to, at this point, right now, it's pointing to the same content, the list, right? But now, let's say if you want to make a copy of the list, a new list that has the same elements in the same order as a given list, you can use a function list. So the reason that they call it function is, once again, they don't really use any reference variable, right? So list is a function. And then the values is the list that pointing to this list. And when you use the function list, the values as an argument, right? The price is now, this reference variable price is pointing to a new list, right? Which is identical to the list to which values points, right? It's two separate lists. So you should know the difference between this diagram and the previous one. So copying the list. Okay, so I'm going to skip these slices of list, and then please read this common list functions and operators. Please read this. It's operations and descriptions. Okay, and okay, so but before I end this lecture, let's just try this example. So now when you have let's say so you have a values, right? Let's just do the val. Let's say val is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and if you want to copy the actual list, and then if you want to make a new list, right, then you simply use the list function and then the name of the reference variable, right, and then print val2. Okay, so but if you run this, you will see 1, 2, 4, 6, right? Which is exactly exact replica of val list. But you know this val2 is now what? It points to a new list. But that new list has the identical elements. Okay, so one more example. Let's just try the couple of more example. Let's say finding the elements. If I want to find the index number of, let's say, element 4, you can do what? I can do print. I can use function index, right? So, but index is, as you can see, is a method. So let's say val dot, and then what is a index, right? Index, and then I want to find element number 4, index of the element number 4, right? So I'm going to print that result. So val is the name of the reference variable, and index is the method, and then 4 is the element. So this should give me what? Index number 2, right? Because it's index 0, index 1, and this is index 2. So this should print a 2. So let's run this. Okay, so it's going to print 2. Okay, so I'm going to end my lecture.